Welcome back to This is Thailand. Today's story comes from Brendan. He's 63 years old, retired steel worker from County Laois in the Irish Midlands. 38 years on the factory floor. A man who, by every measure, had done everything right, worked hard, paid his way, looked after his own. He's not the kind of man you'd expect to find himself in Pattaya. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't naive. Not exactly. He wasn't naive. Not exactly. He was something else, something that made him in some ways more vulnerable than the men who come here looking for trouble. This one's going to stay with you. Not because of what he lost, though what he lost was substantial, but because of why. And when you hear him explain it, in his own words, I think you'll recognize something. Maybe in someone you know, maybe in yourself. Here's his story, in his own words. My name is Brendan. I'm from Port Louise, County Laois, which is more or less the dead center of Ireland if you're looking at a map, and pretty close to the dead center in most other respects as well. I worked at a structural steel fabrication plant outside the town for 38 years. Started at 23, finished at 61. Beams, columns, trusses, staircases, brackets, anything you'd bolt together to make a building stand up. Not glamorous work. Good work. I was fine with it. I met Maura at a dance in Tullamore in 1987. She was there with her friend Geraldine, who I was actually trying to talk to, which Maura thought was hilarious and never let me forget. We married in 1989, bought a house in Tullamore, had Ciara, got on with it, no great drama. She worked in the credit union for 20 years. I drove in the credit union for 20 years. I drove into the plant and drove home. We went to Lanzarote twice. That was more or less the shape of it, and I was fine with the shape. Then in 2019, Maura was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. I'm not going to go into it too much. She had 4 years of it. The last 18 months were at home with me. I organized it the way I organized everything. I made a schedule. I spoke to the doctors. I learned what I needed to learn. I made sure whoever needed to be there was there. District nurse on Mondays and Thursdays. Ciara down from Kildare at weekends when she could. Her sister Bridie one afternoon a week. I had a spreadsheet. That sounds cold. It wasn't cold. It was just how I knew to do things. You identify the problem, you work out what's needed, you make sure it gets done. She died in December 2022, just after Christmas. The house went very quiet. People were good. Ciara rang every day for a while. My sister Bernie and Athlone had me over for dinners. I didn't eat much of. Lads from the plant sent cards. The parish priest came, which I hadn't expected and didn't know what to do with. Everyone asking how I was getting on, tilting their head a certain way when they asked. I was fine. I told them I was fine. That wasn't a lie exactly. It was more that I didn't have the vocabulary for what it actually was. The thing is, I knew grief. Or I thought I did. I'd been told what it looked like, the stages of it, and so forth. What I wasn't prepared for was this other thing, this absence of function. I'd spent 4 years being needed in a very specific way, every single day, and then I wasn't needed anymore. The schedule was gone. The spreadsheet was closed. I'd come downstairs in the morning, and the day would just be sitting there with nothing in it. I sold the house in August 2023, 8 months after she went. I know people thought it was too soon. Maybe it was. But I couldn't walk past her chair without, well, I just couldn't. The money from the house, minus what needed sorting, came to roughly $15,800. I put it in the credit union, and I sat in a rented flat in Port Louise, and I had, for the first time in my adult life, nowhere I needed to be and nothing I needed to do. Sandy Brennan had worked at the plant with me for years before he took early retirement. Good lad, Seany, though he'd talk the hind legs off a donkey if you let him. He'd done a golf trip to Thailand about 5 years back, Hua Hin, I think, and he'd been going on about it ever since. In September 2023, he sent me a video on WhatsApp. Some lad on YouTube doing a tour of his apartment in Pattaya. Very warm, he says into the camera, spreading his arms at a balcony view. 2 bedrooms, nice spot, 14,000 baht a month. That's about €360, he says with a grin. I watched that video. I watched 4 more. I want to be straight about this because I think it matters. I was not looking for a woman. I want to say that clearly, not because I'm embarrassed. I'm past embarrassed at this point, as you'll hear, but because it's true and it's part of the story. What I was looking for was somewhere I could be warm, and where nobody would tilt their head at me. I'd spent 38 years in a factory and 4 years as a carer, and I was tired in a way I couldn't explain. And I wanted somewhere I could sit outside in November without a coat and eat something interesting and not have anyone ask me how I was holding up. That was genuinely all it was. I booked the flights that week. Bangkok, then a bus south to Pattaya. I should tell you I'd never been outside of Europe. Lanzarote twice, one trip to London for a match, a weekend in Amsterdam for someone's stag that I don't remember clearly. That was my travel history at 63 years of age. So Suvarnabhumi Airport at 6 in the morning, the noise and the heat and the sheer number of people and the signs in Thai everywhere. That was a lot to take in. I just followed the crowd and got on the bus. I found a guest house on Soi 8 in Pattaya, nothing fancy, clean enough, 2,000 baht a night, which seemed reasonable. I spent the first 3 days just walking. Along the beach road in the mornings when it was still cool enough. Through the markets. Up and down streets I didn't know the names of. Nobody knew me. Nobody asked me anything. I bought pad kra pao from a cart near the guest house. I didn't know what it was called. I just pointed and ate it standing up on the pavement. And it cost 60 baht, which is about €1.50, and it was the best thing I'd eaten in 2 years. I know that sounds like I'm romanticizing it. Maybe I am. But there's something about being somewhere entirely foreign, where nobody has any version of you in their head, where you're not the man whose wife just died or the quiet lad from a steel plant or Bernie's brother. You're just a big Irish fella in a short-sleeved shirt looking confused at a menu. I found that I could breathe a bit more than I had been. I walked past Walking Street on my second evening. Had a look, saw the go-go bars, the neon, the touts at every doorway, the women standing outside in heels at 9 in the evening. I kept walking. That wasn't what I was there for. I'm not saying that to make myself sound better than I was. I'm just telling you what was true at that particular moment. I found a sports bar further back from the main drag, pool table, big screen showing the Premier League, nothing fancy. Ordered a singa. Sat down, watched the second half of something. Thought, this'll do. I started going back every evening. There were a handful of regulars, mostly English and Australian, a few Irish. I didn't talk much. Just watched the football, had a couple of beers, went back to the guest house. But it was something. It was a shape to the evening. And that, the search for a shape, for something to fill the hours with, for a reason to be somewhere at a particular time, that is where this whole thing really starts. Not with knock, that comes next. With the emptiness that was there before her. I'd been in Pattaya about 2.5 weeks when I started to get the hang of it, not the nightlife side of it. I still kept away from that, mostly, but just the ordinary logistics of being somewhere new. I knew which cart near the guest house did the best cow pad. I'd figured out the bot buses, those little red pickup trucks that run up and down Beach Road for 10 baht a go, which took me an embarrassingly long time because nobody explained them, and they don't look like buses. I knew the 7-Eleven on the corner stayed cold enough inside that you could stand there for 5 minutes pretending to look at the sandwiches if the heat got to you. It was a strange little life. But it was a life. I'd settled into a routine at the sports bar. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for the football. Singa to start, Leo after that because it was cheaper, and honestly I couldn't tell the difference. There were 3 or 4 lads I nodded at. Gary, an English bloke from Coventry who'd been there 7 years and had very strong opinions about Pattaya in the old days that I wasn't qualified to evaluate. A quiet Australian named Phil who worked online, I think, though he never said doing what. We didn't really talk, just occupy the same space, watched the same screens. It suited me fine. The Tuesday knock sat down next to me. Liverpool were playing someone, I want to say Wolves, but I'm not certain. The bar was about half full. I'd been there an hour already. I was on my second Leo, and I was watching the game and not thinking about much, which was the whole point. She didn't come in through the front like a customer. She came through the side door from the back, the way you'd come if you knew the staff, sat down on the stool next to mine, ordered something from the waitress, and looked up at the screen. Then she looked at me. She asked if I was Irish. I said I was. How did she know? She said she could tell from the boots. I looked down at my boots. They were just boots. I still don't know what she meant. Her name was Knock. That's a nickname. Most Thai people use them, I'd come to understand, and their actual given names are often long enough that nobody uses them day to day. She was 34. She was from Roy Et, which is a province up in the northeast of the country, a region called Isan, which I'd never heard of. She'd been in Pattaya 3 years. She didn't tell me what she did, and I didn't ask, and I want to be honest with you about that. I understood the context. This wasn't me being naive. I was sitting in a bar in Pattaya, and a 34-year-old Thai woman had sat down next to me. I knew what Pattaya was, even if I'd been avoiding the worst of it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I thought she was a schoolteacher, but she didn't perform. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I'd watched enough of those YouTube videos about Thailand to know what the performance looked like. The giggling, the immediate flattery, the hand on the arm, the "you so handsome, where you from?" None of that. She just talked to me. Normal conversation, the way you'd talk to someone on a train. She asked about Ireland. Was it really as green as it looked in pictures? I said yes, greener actually. She asked what I did, and I told her, steel fabrication, retired now. She asked what that meant, what did I actually make? And this is the part that surprises me even now, I explained it to her. For about 20 minutes, beams, columns, connections, tolerance measurements, the difference between hot-rolled and cold-formed sections, and she listened. Actually listened, not the polite nodding that people do when they're waiting for you to stop. She asked follow-up questions that made sense. I mentioned Mora. I hadn't planned to. It came out sideways, the way things do when you haven't talked much for a long time. I said something about how my wife would have found the heat difficult, and then there it was, the past tense, hanging there. Didn't rush to fill it, didn't say, oh, I'm so sorry, just waited. And then said quietly, she passed away. I said yes. She nodded. Said nothing more. Let it be what it was. I hadn't realized. I said nothing more. Let it be what it was. I hadn't realized, until that moment, how much I needed someone to just let it be what it was, now. I know what you might be thinking, watching this. You might be thinking, come on, Brendan, you're 63 years old and you've read enough about the world. You know what that kind of attentiveness is for. And you'd be right. I did know. I'm telling you this not to excuse myself, but to explain something. There is a particular cruelty in being listened to, really listened to, for the first time in 2 years, by someone whose professional skill is making men feel heard. It doesn't matter what you know. The need is stronger than the knowledge. She stayed for the second half of the match. We talked a bit more. Football came up. She said she didn't follow it, but she understood why men found it useful, having a reason to sit somewhere for 90 minutes. I thought that was fairly perceptive. At the end of the night, I paid the bar fine. It was 1,000 baht, about 26 euro. The mama-san behind the bar didn't react, which told me this was a normal enough arrangement even if it hadn't looked like it. I'm not going to describe what came after because it's not the point of the story and I think you can fill that in yourself. What matters is the morning. She didn't leave. That was the first thing. She didn't get dressed and go. She was there when I woke up, sitting on the edge of the bed looking at her phone, and when she heard me move, she put the kettle on, a little travel kettle the guest house provided, and made tea without asking if I wanted any. 2 cups, proper tea, not the Thai version, which is a different thing entirely. She sat down, and she asked me, what was the most complicated thing you ever had to build? I thought about it. Told her about a staircase we'd fabricated for an office building in Dublin. A helical design, the geometry of it had taken weeks to work out, and then it had to be assembled on-site in a stairwell that was 20 centimeters narrower than the drawing said. Took 3 days, and a lot of language I won't repeat. She laughed. Asked what language. I said Irish, which isn't true, but it's funnier. When she left, I gave her 5,000 baht. About 130 euro. She said it wasn't necessary. I gave it anyway, not to buy anything, not as a transaction, just because it needed doing. That's how I thought about it at the time. I don't know if that distinction makes me better or worse. Maybe neither. Maybe it's just accurate. I'd booked to fly home in 4 days. That evening I extended by 2 weeks. I told myself it was the weather. October in Laos is wet and gray, and the flat in Port Laos had no central heating was talking about. That was true. It was also not the reason. The days I didn't see her, I thought about the next time I would. Not obsessively. Just, it was there. A direction to point in. A reason the day had a shape. I think about that now, and I understand it for what it was. I was a man who'd spent 4 years with a reason to get up in the morning, and 18 months after that with nothing. And here was something. Not love, not yet, I'm not going to insult the word, but something. And Pattaya, for all its hard edges, is very good at being something to a man who has nothing. The 2 extra weeks went quickly. We fell into a pattern, the way you do when you're not really examining what you're doing too closely. She'd come to the guest house 3 or 4 evenings a week. Sometimes we'd go out and eat. There was an Izan place on a side street off Swai Buakau. Nothing to look at from the outside. Plastic chairs and a fan in the corner that moved the heat around without doing much about it. But the somtam was the best thing I'd ever eaten, and it cost about 80 baht. Sometimes we'd just get food from the carts on Second Road and bring it back. Muping, those little grilled pork skewers, and sticky rice from a bag, and Leo from the 7-Eleven. Not complicated. It suited me. She was teaching me. She was teaching me things without making it feel like she was teaching me anything. How to order without pointing. How the bot buses worked if you wanted to go further than Beach Road. What the spirit house outside every building was for. She explained it without any ceremony, the way you'd explain to someone which bin was for recycling. I filed it away. I liked learning things that actually applied to where I was standing. I went home to Ireland in November. Had to. There was still paperwork outstanding from the house sale, some correspondence with the solicitor in Tullamore that I'd been letting go. I sorted it in 4 days, saw Ciara one evening in Nas. She'd made dinner, we ate it, we talked about her job and her partner Ronan and a planning dispute her neighbor was having. Normal things, good things. And at some point, over the washing up, she said, "Dad, you seem," and then she stopped. I said, "I seem what?" She said, "Different." I said, "Different good or different bad?" She said, "Just different." I didn't push it either way. I flew back to Pattaya 9 days after I'd left. I didn't push it either way. I flew back to Pattaya 9 days after I'd left. A short-term service department off Soy 15, nothing fancy. But it had a proper kitchen and a balcony, and I could do my own washing. 15,000 baht a month. About €380, which felt like very little for something that was nicer than the flat I'd rented in Port Louise. I was still on tourist visa entries at this point, just doing border runs. I'd looked into the non-OA retirement visa. You need 800,000 baht sitting in a Thai bank account, which is roughly €20,000, or proof of monthly income of 65,000 baht. I had the savings to satisfy it. I started making some inquiries. In December, Nok mentioned her son. His name was Lek, 8 years old, living with her mother up in Royat. She showed me a photo on her phone, a boy in a school uniform, a bit serious looking, the way kids are when they've been told to stand still for a photo. She said she missed him. She sent money home every month, had done since she came to Pattaya. It was just understood, she said. She was the eldest daughter and her mother was getting older, and their mother was getting older, and there was a younger brother still in school. That's how it works, she said, without any complaint in it. Just fact. I understood this was genuine. Whatever else I did and didn't know about Nok, the feeling when she talked about that boy was real. You can tell the difference. I've been around people long enough, she mentioned, in passing, that the school fees for the second term were coming due. 18,000 baht. About €470. She wasn't asking me. She was just talking, telling me about her life, the way people do. I said I'd sort it. She started to say no, and I said it's fine, Nok. It needs doing. I'll transfer it tomorrow. She looked at me for a moment and then nodded. No fuss. She said thank you and that was that. I want to explain something about that decision because I think it's where people watching this might think, that's the moment, that's when he was had. And I understand why it looks that way. But it didn't feel that way from inside it. I'd spent 4 years organizing medication deliveries and district nurse rosters and making sure keywords the spare key was. The habit of identifying a problem and fixing it. It wasn't something I thought about. It was just what I did. There was a child who needed his school fees paid and I had the money and it was €470. I fixed it. That's all it was. That's the honest answer. I wasn't buying her loyalty. I wasn't even being particularly generous in my own mind. It just needed doing and I was there. The monthly allowance followed about 3 weeks later. She hadn't asked for that either, not directly. We'd had a conversation about her work, the only real one, oblique enough that we both understood what we were talking about without saying it plainly, and I said I'd rather she didn't. She said she had to eat. I said I'd sort that. 25,000 baht a month. About €650. She asked was I sure. I said yes. She said okay. I went back to Ireland again at Christmas. Ciara, Bernie, the usual round of it. New Year's Eve in Athlone at Bernie's. Watching something on the telly, a glass of wine. I was fine. I was present. And I was also counting the days, which I pretended wasn't happening and which Bernie, I suspect, noticed and didn't mention. I flew back to Pattaya on the 4th of January. I think about the Christmas visit a lot. Not because anything significant happened. It didn't. But because I remember sitting on Bernie's sofa on New Year's Day, looking out at the gray Athlone sky and the bare trees along the river and thinking, I don't belong here anymore. And at the time that felt like a good thing, like I'd finally found somewhere I did belong. I wasn't wrong exactly, I just didn't understand what I was belonging to. By January, Nok had stopped whatever she'd been doing before. I don't know this for a fact, she never said it explicitly, and I didn't ask in a way that required an explicitly, and I didn't ask in a way that required an explicit answer. But the shape of her time changed. She started keeping some things in my apartment, a few clothes, some of that Thai skincare stuff that cluttered up the bathroom shelf. Small changes, normal ones. I started looking up visa agents. Started learning a few words of Thai, learned to say Kob Kun Krap, thank you, and Sabai Di Mai, how are you? And she laughed at my pronunciation every single time without it ever feeling unkind. She introduced me to some of her friends, a woman called Mint who worked in a nail salon near Central Festival. A couple called Oot and Dal who ran a small sumtam cart near the market, early morning trade mostly. Normal people, ordinary lives. I remember thinking, this is just people. These are just people living their lives. I know that sounds naive, maybe it was. But it was also true. Ciara rang one Sunday in late January. We talked for 20 minutes. I told her partway through that I'd met someone. There was a pause. She said, someone Thai. There was a pause. She said, someone Thai. I said, yes. She said, "Awk." I said, "I think so, yeah." She said, "Okay." And we moved on to talking about something else. That pause. I've thought about that pause quite a lot since. She was being careful with me. She's a good girl, Ciara. She knew I'd had nothing for a long time and she didn't want to take away the something. I understand that. I also think, now, that she knew more than she was saying and was hoping she was wrong. She wasn't wrong. But that part comes later. By February, I'd sorted the retirement visa, opened a Thai bank account with a branch near the Jomtien immigration office, transferred 800,000 baht into it, just over 20,000 euro, to satisfy the deposit requirement, and a visa agent sorted the rest of the paperwork for a fee of 15,000 baht. It was straightforward enough once you knew the steps, which the agent did, and I didn't. I got my non-OA stamped at the immigration office on Soi Siam Country Club, valid for a year, renewable. 90-day reporting required, which the agent explained meant physically presenting myself at an immigration office every 3 months or doing it online. Fine. I could manage a form. I moved into the Jomtien apartment in early February. 22,000 baht a month, about 570 euro, for a proper one-bedroom on the 8th floor with a balcony facing toward the sea, as you craned your neck. It was nicer than anywhere I'd lived since Tullamore. Tiled floors, air conditioning that actually worked, a washing machine that didn't require feeding coins. I bought a cafetiere and decent coffee from a place near Central Festival, and I'd sit on the balcony in the mornings before the heat built up properly, watching the motorbikes on the road below and the palm trees and the haze over the water. And it was, I don't want to over-dramatize it, it was just quiet. A good quiet. The kind I hadn't had for a long time. Noak and I had settled into something that felt, from where I was standing, like a real relationship. She stayed 4 or 5 nights a week. We cooked sometimes, though mainly she cooked and I watched and tried to learn things, with limited success. She found my attempts at Thai food genuinely funny rather than politely funny, which I appreciated. We'd walk down to Jomtien Beach in the evenings when it cooled off, get fresh coconut from one of the carts, sit on the plastic chairs facing the water. I knew those weren't profound experiences, they were just evenings, but they were evenings that had something in them, and that was more than I'd had. I was careful, in my way. I kept myself slightly apart from the expat crowd at the sports bar. I'd seen enough of that world to know it had its own gravity. Men who'd been there 5 years and 10 years and whose entire social life had contracted to the same 40 square meters of bar and the same circular conversations about how Thailand used to be and how the women had changed and how the tourist police were useless. I didn't want to become that. I went in for the football, nodded at Gary and Phil, drank my 2 Laois and left. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answered. That's the thing I'd say to myself now, watching someone else in my position. I kept the arrangement tidy in my head by not examining the edges of it too closely. What had she done before January? Whether there were others before me who'd paid school fees. Whether the amount I was sending was determined by calculation or by genuine need. I didn't ask. The habit of not asking had served me adequately through most of my adult life, and I saw no reason to change it now. Then in late March her mother got sick. Nock told me on a Tuesday evening, sitting on the balcony. She wasn't dramatic about it, just determined. She was rarely dramatic about anything. That was still one of the things I valued most. Kidney problem, she said. Her mother had been having trouble for months but hadn't said anything because she didn't want to worry. Nock, which was apparently very typical of her. She needed to be hospitalized. There was no insurance, Nock said this, the way you'd state a fact about the weather, without self-pity, because in rural Aizen it wasn't unusual. It was just how things were. The bill was 180,000 baht. I did the sum in my head while she was still talking. About 4,700 euro. I told her I'd cover it. She said she couldn't ask me to do that. I said she hadn't asked. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the sea, and then she said she would pay me back when she could. I said there was no rush. I told myself it was a loan. I didn't write that down anywhere, didn't put it in a message, didn't even say it out loud in a way that would make it a formal arrangement rather than a private reassurance I was offering myself. I think about that decision specifically, not the money. The decision specifically, not the money. The decision not to write it down. Because I knew, at some level, that writing it down would have made it transactional. And I didn't want it to be transactional. I wanted it to be what you did for someone you cared about. It was both things. That's the complicated part. One transferred the money the following morning from my Irish account. Took a few days to clear. When it did, she sent me a line message. Just the word Cob Kun, thank you, and a photograph of her mother sitting up in a hospital bed in Konkan smiling. A drip in her arm, and a get-well balloon visible in the background that one of the nurses had clearly tied to the bed rail. She looked like a small, tired woman who was glad to still be there. I saved that photo. I'm not sure why I'm telling you that, but I did. 6 weeks later came the house. Her mother couldn't go back to the family home in Royet, Noak explained. The structure was compromised, some combination of age and termite damage, and the fact that rural Thai construction in Isan in the 1980s was not always built to last. The rainy season was coming in May and June, and the roof couldn't hold it. Her mother needed somewhere dry to recover. The estimate from the local builder was 680,000 baht. About 17,800 euro. I asked to see the estimate. She showed me a photo on her phone of a handwritten quote on lined paper in Thai, with a figure at the bottom. I couldn't read it. I said the figure seemed reasonable for a house. She said it was a small house, just 2 bedrooms and a kitchen and a proper bathroom. Her mother had never had an indoor bathroom. I said that sounded fine then. I'm aware of how that reads. A man who worked with structural tolerances for 38 years, who could look at a spec sheet and find the error in 30 seconds. Agreeing to fund a construction project in a province he'd never visited based on a handwritten note in a language he couldn't read. I know. I know exactly how that reads. The Western Union shop was on a side street off 2nd Road, a narrow place with a worn linoleum floor and a ceiling fan, and a queue of mostly Asian faces sending money home. The limit per transfer was 200,000 baht, so it had to go in 3 installments over 6 weeks. I queued up the first time in April, the second time in early May, the third time the week after. The third time, I was still in the shop when my phone rang. It was Nock. She said the last transfer had come through. She said her mother was staying with a neighbor while the building started. She said, "Thank you, Brendan." And then she said, "Jaidi. Good heart." I put my phone in my pocket and walked out into the heat of 2nd Road, and I thought, yes, that's what I am. That's what I'm doing here. I walked back to the apartment feeling something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I've counted it up since. Across 11 months, the school fees, the monthly allowance, the hospital bill, the house, miscellaneous things in between, approximately 1,400,000 baht, 36,500 euro. Just under a quarter of everything I had. And then she mentioned marriage. She didn't propose, exactly. It wasn't like that. It came up the way most things came up with Nock, sideways, in the middle of something else, without fanfare. We were having dinner at a place on Soi 6 in North Pattaya, a Thai restaurant she'd chosen, up a flight of stairs and away from the street noise. Good food. Tom kha gai, some larb, rice. I remember there were little paper lanterns hanging over the tables and a small shrine in the corner with a string of marigolds around it. I was eating. She was talking about Lek coming to visit. She wanted to bring him down from Roy Ed for a few weeks, let him see Pattaya, maybe take him to the aquarium at Naklua. I said that sounded grand. And then she said, without any particular change in tone, her family had been asking about us, about whether we were serious, whether there was a future being planned. I said I thought there was. I meant it. I'd been thinking about a second year. I'd been thinking about whether it made sense to keep the Irish savings account or shift more into Thai baht. These are not the thoughts of a man who's about to leave. She said her family would want to know we were serious in a formal way, that in Thailand, when a man wanted to marry a woman, there was a ceremony, a bride price paid to the family. I'd heard the term sin sod by then. You couldn't spend 11 months in Pattaya without hearing it mentioned, though usually in the context of cautionary tales at the sports bar, which I'd been largely tuning out. I knew it was a thing. I didn't know the scale of what she was about to say. 500,000 baht. About 13,000 euro. She said it the way she said everything, matter of fact, no performance in it. She explained it carefully. It was tradition, she said. Her family expected it. It would be displayed at the ceremony to show her value, and then returned to the couple afterward. That was common. Some families kept it. Hers would return it. She wasn't asking for it tomorrow. She was just letting me know that this was how it would need to work if we were going to go forward properly. I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. I didn't say no. I said I'd need to think about it. She nodded, said she understood. We finished dinner, split a mango sticky rice from the cart outside, took a sangthae back toward Jomtien. The evening ended without any tension. No argument, no tears, no pressure. She kissed me goodnight at the apartment door and said, "Sleep well, Brendan," and I said, "You too." I sat on the balcony for a long time after she left. It was September, still warm even at 11 at night, the sound of motorbikes on the road below and someone's television audible from a nearby apartment. I had a Leo. I wasn't really drinking. I was doing the kind of thinking I should probably have done 11 months earlier. €13,000. On top of the 36.5 I'd already sent, that would take the total past 50,000, a third of everything I had. And I didn't actually know. I realized this sitting on that balcony. I didn't know where the house in Royat was. I didn't have an address. I'd never asked for one. I'd sent 680,000 baht to a province I'd never visited for a building. I couldn't have found on a map. I picked up my phone. I hadn't rung Bernie properly since Maura died. We'd texted, the occasional call at Christmas, but I hadn't sat down and talked to her, not really. I dialed the Athlone number. It was 3:30 in the morning there. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding alarmed, and I said, "I'm fine, Bernie. I'm sorry. I need to talk to you." I told her everything. From the sports bar. From the boots. All of it, in the flat, methodical way I'd been trained by 38 years on a factory floor to report a problem. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Brendan, will you do something for me? Will you ring Sini?" I rang Sini the next morning. He sounded surprised to hear from me, then not surprised, the way people get when they've been half expecting a call but hoping it wouldn't come. He said he had a mate who'd done 2 years in Pattaya. He said this mate might be worth talking to. He'd send the number. The man rang me that afternoon. I never asked his name and he never offered it. He talked for 40 minutes. He'd been in Pattaya from 2019 to 2021. He'd met a woman from Isan, living with the grandmother, mother's health trouble. House rebuild. He transferred over 1.5 million baht before the Sin-Sog conversation happened, and he saw it for what it was. He didn't say Nok's name, he didn't know Nok, but the story sat in my stomach like something heavy and cold. Before he hung up, he said, "I'll send you a link." It was a forum. An expat forum. The kind I'd always avoided. A thread that had been running for years, dozens of accounts from men across a dozen nationalities. The details varied. The sequence didn't. Isan background, son. Mother's illness. House, Sin, sod. He was right. It wasn't the same woman. It was the same architecture. I read 6 of the accounts that night in full. I didn't sleep much. I want to be honest about something. Even then, even after the 40-minute phone call and the forum and the 6 accounts, I wasn't certain. I'm still not certain. I don't know if Nok ran a practice script with clear intent from the first night in the sports bar, or she developed genuine feeling at some point along the way and also expected financial support. Both things can be true. I understand that now. I don't know if the hospital bill was real. I don't know if there's a house in Royat. I know I never asked for a receipt or an address or a photograph of the building at any stage. That's on me. What I did know, sitting on the balcony the following evening waiting for her to arrive, was this. I was not going to pay the Sin sod, not now, possibly not ever. She came at 7, same as usual. We had food I'd picked up from the cart downstairs. We sat at the small table by the window, and I told her, as plainly as I could manage, that I wasn't able to do the Sin sod, not yet, maybe not at all. That I needed more time before I could think about marriage in those terms. She looked at me for a moment, then she said she understood. She said she wasn't trying to pressure me. She said these things moved at their own pace. She was calm, and she was kind, and the evening ended normally. And she stayed that night, and in the morning she made tea and asked if I wanted eggs. And the whole thing felt so ordinary that I almost convinced myself I'd misread everything. Almost. The following week she was busy on Wednesday. That happened sometimes. She had her own life. I'd never made demands on her time. I sent a line message on Thursday saying I was heading to the sports bar if she wanted to come by after. She replied with a thumbs up. She didn't come. Saturday she canceled. Something with mint, she said. No problem, I noticed. Of course I noticed. But there's a difference between noticing and knowing, and I stayed on the noticing side of it for longer than I should have. I told myself the Sin-Sod conversation had been uncomfortable, and she needed a bit of space. That was a reasonable thing to tell myself. It wasn't entirely wrong. People need space after difficult conversations. I'd needed it myself. She came on the Sunday. We walked down to Jomtien Beach, bought coconuts, sat watching a group of Thai teenagers playing football in the shallows. It was a good evening. She was warm. She was present. She laughed at something I said about the football. I can't even remember what now. I walked back to the apartment afterward feeling more settled. Whatever I'd been worrying about, I thought, was maybe just me overthinking. She left early the next morning, said she had something to sort. I said fine. She said she'd line me. She didn't line me that day. Or the next. I sent a message on Wednesday. Something ordinary. How are you? I was thinking of trying a new place for dinner. She replied 4 hours later. Busy day. Talk soon. I'd been in Pattaya long enough to understand that this particular kind of evasiveness, this Thai approach to difficult exits, this preference for a gradual fade over direct confrontation, was a real cultural thing, and not something I'd invented. There's a concept for it. Krangjai. The reluctance to cause discomfort directly. You don't end things. You just become less available until the other person understands. I understood. I just didn't want to understand yet. I rang her on the Friday. It went to voicemail. She rang back 2 hours later, said sorry she'd missed it. She was dealing with some stuff at home. Lek, her mother. Nothing serious. I said, take your time, no rush. She said thank you. Was the last real conversation I had with her. Over the following week, the messages got slower. One reply every day, then every 2 days. Always polite, nothing I could point to as definitive. Just less and less until the shape of it became undeniable even to me. I rang the number she'd once given me for her sister in Royat. Said it was to send something for the family, just wanted to confirm the address was still right. The automated message that came back told me the number was not in service. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened the Line app and typed her a message, not an accusation, nothing confrontational. I just asked her to ring me when she had a chance, that I wanted to talk properly. I watched the 2 gray ticks that meant it had been delivered. They stayed gray for a day and a half. Then they went blue, red. She didn't ring. She didn't ring. She didn't reply. That was the moment. Not dramatic. No scene. Just 2 blue ticks on a screen at 7 in the morning. The sound of motorbikes outside on the Jomtien Road. A ceiling fan moving the warm air around. That was the moment I accepted it was over. I want to say something carefully here, because I think it matters. I don't know what knock was. I genuinely don't know. I know what the forum said. I know what the pattern looked like when laid out in a thread with other men's accounts beside it. But I also know that she sat with me in the Asan restaurant on Soi Buakau and laughed when I mispronounced Thai words, and that when I told her about Mora, she let the silence sit, and that the morning after the first night she made tea without being asked, and asked me about the most complicated thing I'd ever built. I know those things happened. I don't know what they meant to her. Maybe they meant something. Maybe they meant nothing. Maybe, and this is the possibility I find hardest to sit with, maybe they meant something and she still ran the same playbook regardless, because that's the life she was living and I was the resource available to her, and poverty makes practical people of everyone. I don't know. I'll never know. And that not knowing is its own particular thing to carry. She was gone. Whatever she was, however the book's balance on her intentions, she was gone, and the money was gone with her. 36,500 euro and 11 months, and the version of myself that had briefly thought, Jai D, good heart, was enough of an identity to build something on. I stayed in Pattaya for 3 more weeks after that. I'm not sure why. Not waiting for her. I knew better than that. Not even enjoying myself particularly. I just wasn't ready to leave. I walked Jomtien Beach in the mornings and ate alone at the Asan place on Soi Buakau and watched the football at the sports bar, and didn't talk much to anyone. One evening, Gary from Coventry sat down beside me. He'd been there 9 years by then, which I'd always found slightly alarming but had never said. He didn't ask what was wrong. He could see the shape of it, I suppose. He'd seen it enough times. He just sat there for a while, then said, most of us paid something for the education. You got off cheaper than most. I didn't find that comforting. But I've thought about it since, and I think what he meant was true, which isn't the same as comforting. I booked my flight home on a Thursday, flew out of Bangkok on a Thursday, flew out of Bangkok on a Tuesday morning in November 2024, 14 months after I'd arrived. I'm going to give you the numbers first, the way a steelworker would. School fees, 18,000 baht. Monthly allowance across 11 months, 275,000 baht. Hospital bill, 180,000 baht. House, 680,000 baht. Miscellaneous, meals, small transfers, things I can't account for precisely, roughly 250,000 baht. Total, approximately 1,400,000 baht. Total, approximately 1,400,000 baht, 36,500 euro. That's what went. I was never defrauded in any legal sense. There was no contract, no promise made in writing, no document with my name on it. I transferred every baht willingly, from my own accounts to recipients of my own choosing without being coerced. There is no recourse. I've spoken to nobody about pursuing any. It would be like trying to sue someone for accepting a gift. The 800,000 baht I'd put in the Thai bank for the retirement visa, that's still there. I had it transferred back to Ireland before I flew out. The visa is cancelled now, obviously. I lost the application fee, 15,000 baht, which is the least of it. So, the full picture. I arrived in Thailand with roughly portion 80,000. I spent about 14 months there. I came home with approximately portion 1,801,000 after everything. The title says I lost my entire retirement savings. That's not literally true. But I lost 36,500 euro, and the only thing that had made me feel like a person again since Mora died, and that felt total enough. I rented a flat in Port Louis. Not Tullamore. I'm not ready for Tullamore yet, maybe next year. The flat is fine. Ground floor, a small garden out the back that I don't use much. Central heating that actually works, which I appreciate more than I used to. Ciara rings on Sundays. She came to visit in December, the first time I'd seen her in person since I flew back. We went for a long walk along the canal, and she asked me how I was really doing, and I told her the truth, which was that I was fine in the way I'd always been fine, but that I was also going to a bereavement group at the parish now, which was 2 years late but better than not going. She said, "Good." That was all she said. Good. She didn't say, "I told you." I love her for that. The bereavement group meets on Tuesday evenings in the parish hall. 9 or 10 people, chairs in a circle. A woman named Caitlin who runs it with a kind of patient competence that Mara would have admired and also slightly competed with. I've been 4 times. I don't talk much, but I go. That counts for something. I think about Nok sometimes. Not with anger, mostly or not only with anger, with a kind of complicated accounting that I can't quite balance. She was from Roy H. She had a son she missed. Her mother had been sick. These things were true, or at least some version of them was true, and I can't strip them out of the story just because the story ended badly. Poverty is real. The limited options available to a woman in her circumstances are real. I was a resource that arrived in front of her. And I was a man with money and a broken caretaking instinct and no shortage of willingness to believe what I needed to believe. We were both, in our way, doing what we had to do. I don't say that to excuse anything. I say it because it's the most accurate thing I can say. Here is what I'd tell someone, if they asked. Not the specific warnings, don't pay the bar fine, don't transfer the school fees, watch for the sequence. Those are useful, and I'd give them. But underneath the specific warnings is a more general one, and it's this: know what you're running from before you get on the plane. I thought I knew. I thought the grief was done, or close enough to done that it wouldn't make decisions for me anymore. I was wrong. Grief doesn't finish when you stop crying. It finds other forms. Mine found the form of a 63-year-old man standing in a Western Union on 2nd Road sending 18,000 euro to a province he'd never seen because he needed something to take care of, and there was nothing left at home that needed him. I wasn't ready. That's the whole story. Not Thailand, not Noak, not the pattern on the forum. Just a man who wasn't ready, in a city that is very good at finding exactly what you're not ready for. Mora would have called me an Egypt. She'd have said it kindly. She'd have said it kindly. She was good at that. That's Brendan's story. And here at This Is Thailand, we're grateful he was willing to tell it. What strikes us about Brendan isn't the money. 36,000 euro is significant, but it's recoverable. What strikes us is the mechanism. He wasn't targeted because he was reckless. He was targeted because he was decent. A man who spent 4 years caring for someone he loved, who'd organized medication schedules and district nurse rosters with the same steady competence he brought to structural steel, and whose grief, when it finally had nowhere to go, became the vulnerability that Pattaya found and used. We won't tell you Nok was purely cynical. We don't know that. What we know is that there exists, in Pattaya and in other places like it, an ecosystem that has learned over many years to identify a specific kind of need and meet it, at a specific kind of price. Whether that's malice or survival or something in between depends on who you ask and when. What we can tell you is this: if you're considering a move to Thailand, for retirement, for warmth, for a fresh start after something that broke you, please know what broke you before you arrive. Thailand will not fix it. Thailand will find it. And it will cost you more than the visa fee. Take care of yourselves out there. We'll see you next time on This is Thailand.